Hello folks, welcome back to another video here on Keep Productive. Today we're very lucky to have Curtis McHale do a tour of how he uses Obsidian. This is going to be an in-depth way on how he uses the application to take book notes and to manage a lot of information that is coming into his system. I think you'll find this one really interesting. You can check out the Obsidian Made Simple course below, which is all about how to learn Obsidian in 2021. Anyway folks, I'll pass you over to Curtis for today's tour and video. Welcome back to the Keep Productive YouTube channel. It's Francesco here. Today I'm very lucky to be joined by Curtis McHale. How are you, Curtis? All right?
Pretty good.
We've been chatting about dad stuff and all sorts, right? Already.
Which I said I devolve into tangents easily sometimes.
Well, it was a good tangent, I think, for sure. Before we dive in, I wanted to introduce everyone to Curtis. He runs a YouTube channel all about productivity tools and resources. Sound familiar? And it's not just about that. He talks about books and occasionally programming, which he does is his main sort of talent during the day. But what's really interesting is he's got a few Skillshare classes as well, which cover TikTok. I was going to say TikTok and
and time blocking is coming out in the next week or two, so I don't know when this comes out.
Oh, we'll get it in there. We'll get it in the links so people can go and jump in. But yeah, it's going to be really exciting. We're going to chat today about Obsidian. So I've got a few questions to start for you, if that's all right.
Of course.
All right, brilliant. So obviously the biggest question is why did you choose Obsidian over Rome when you got started?
Well, and the fastest and easiest answer to that is, number one, Rome was locked out. You couldn't join it at the time. And I was like, but I want to find a good tool for this. And I've been looking for a tool similar to Rome, Obsidian, whatever, for a long time. And I thought it was DevonThink for a while, and I still love DevonThink, but for primary sources, not for my thoughts, right? And I can kind of see over my shoulder here, there's probably 7 or 8 notebooks there that are just handwritten notes on books I did for quite a long time, where I took handwritten notes on just everything I wrote. I've probably got 150 books handwritten that I haven't fully transferred into Obsidian yet.
You're gonna?
I am slowly working on it. So yes, I'm not doing it immediately because the note formats have changed. Something I did to seed my Obsidian database, actually, because I write in Markdown already, was to go through and copy the last 100 and just change the any book titles I link to, just change them to wiki links. And then because in the context of a book review, I'll reference other books I've read. And so if I did that, I would just change it to a wiki link and just move off the link on my site to the other book, just kind of as a reference link beside it in a Markdown link, so I could still find that. So I did that with a whole ton to help seed my database, but it was not ideal really, but it was a good way to kind of get going and what do I think about this? How do I like it? And the other big reason is I like to own my data. And not that I don't trust Rome or some external resource, but I just like to see files on my computer I can do stuff with. And I also work mostly with an iPad, which I said earlier. We're going to talk about my Obsidian workflow, but most of it is actually I do almost all my data entry when I'm reading a book sitting on the couch behind me with my iPad beside me, and I just enter in notes right there. I do most of my writing, so even extracting data out of it on OneWriter in my iPad. When I'm looking for a new writing idea for my Friday emails, that's where I usually go. I search writing idea, search a couple things, and kind of find some connected stuff and put it together. So I do have specific reasons I like Obsidian, but for some workflows.
So I'm guessing you're going to love it if they bring an iPad app out, right?
I really will. I think I'm not generally excited to work on Mac OS in general, because we're getting onto a tangent. I think that Mac OS is easier to be distracted because of the multi-windowing. And I think that the singular focus or the small focus of apps makes it harder, as long as you set your iPad up properly to not have notifications, to not have all this other stuff flying at you, then it can set it up properly to really monotask and focus well on that single thing. Probably the first book that I really wrote it was a 6,000 word review was Cal Newport's Deep Work. And when I read that, I don't know, 6 years ago now, I think I've read it twice since then. It was like, this book has been saying everything I wanted to, like everything I've been kind of striving towards. This says it. And it was like totally, my wife could name the book probably. I just talked and talked and talked. But I think that a lot of the ideas in deep work, in the productivity they want, really transfer well to working on an iPad. So yes, I love it if they come out when they come out, because they say they will. There's just no timeline yet, which is fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I can get lots that I need out of it. And ultimately I'm a programmer. I could write search and replace stuff or whatever to convert it to something else if I wanted. So I think that iPad needs to be a focus for a lot of developers though, because the only thing I really can't do, even from my coding aspect, is inspect web pages really well and inspect some JavaScript stuff. That's the only thing I can't do on my iPad. Everything else I can, like I program on my iPad all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to do that anyway. It's good skills. And like you mentioned there, like that you used obviously like paper to be able to do book reviews before, but in a way, did you use any other tools before Obsidian? Was there like an Evernote or anything like that in the sort of?
Yeah, so there's DevonThink. And so what I used to do, and I still do this part, I just added my own thoughts, is I would take, I'd write by hand in a notebook, all the notes out, and then I would copy them out and add to them, right? And look for other links and drop it all into DevonThink. And then, but I'd look for other links. I built something very similar to what a lot of people would do in Obsidian, like just trying to figure out how things link together, what ideas link together, right? And then even finding my own thoughts about like, hey, I want if such and such is true, then these other three things seem to follow in tightly, right? So something I read recently in The War Against Normal People by Andrew Yang, which is kind of like how the middle class, especially in central US, is kind of being decimated by tech jobs as they move somewhere else, right? The factory jobs are drying up. And I think, okay, and so they're disillusioned from the American dream, right? And then we see that. So it seems to be a fairly logical path how you could get to a white supremacist group, because they have seen all this stuff that they're told they could get can't happen, and who steals it, right? I don't approve of any of it, but I can see how that, right? And see how it links into the case against education, which would say that education is mostly signaling, saying, yes, I will conform to society's expectations. So coming from, we'll say middle America, just to pick not like coming from that, like a factory job town where you're like, we go to factory job and you're like, but I didn't signal far enough because I only went to high school and then expected a factory job. Right. And seeing that basically the dreams being ripped away, like you can see looking for a community in that also agrees with you, that then results in these other things that are terrible. Right. Like, so that I would also link for that. And my reviews will even say that, like, link, have 22 references and 5 other books that I think link together. And here's 3 books I want to read too. So,
yeah. Bloody hell. Curtis's reading skills. Francesco's reading skills.
Well, so how to read a book is right here. I think that I read that when I was 35 and I'm 40 now. And I remember talking to an older guy, and it would have been in his 70s maybe. I used to be on the board at a local college. And so I was sitting there talking to a former president, and he said, oh, tell me one book to read. And I always say, no, I'll tell you 2 books to read. First book is always How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. With one caveat on that book, it was written originally in the 50s, I think, and updated in the 70s. So all author references are male. Like he did this, authors. So we'll give that a caveat, but otherwise it's really good. And then I'd say, and whatever book you're interested in. Now I'd probably say 3, because I would also add How to Take Smart Notes. I think that those are 2 very foundational books in how to read and how to read a smart book. How to read a book by Mortimer J. Adler. When I finished reading that, I was like, all of the reading I've done before doesn't count. Yeah. And I felt the same way about How to Take Smart Notes. I was like, all the notes I've took before this don't count. And the older gentleman who was say in his 70s said, I felt the same way when I read How to Read How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. He's like, I felt the same way, but I was 60 when I read it. When I read that book, and thought everything I've read before this doesn't count. So I think that's how informed some of my reading and how I think about things. And then again, How to Take Smart Notes kind of inform my note taking on it now.
I heard about the How to Take Smart Notes book, but I've only recently heard about it. And the other book, the How to Read a Book, crikey! I mean, I need to read these 2 books before. But yeah.
Well, the caveat on How to Read a Book: if you read the first half, About the first half, you're getting like 95% of the content. The last is like,
All right.
if you're reading poetry, like this is how you would do it with
Yeah,
poetry.
no.
And like, I don't care about poetry. Like personally, poetry is fine. I have nothing against it. I'm just not something I'm interested in at this moment.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
didn't like,
same.
you can
Yeah.
skip a whole chunk of the like last part of that book. If you read the first third or half, and I've gifted this book to like students, guys I hike with who are students are like, oh, what should I read? And I was like, read this book here. Right. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah, but only read the first half. And again, when I off in law school, and he said, you're right. I read it this summer and I like eclipsed everyone else's reading. It was so much easier. I got so much more out of it. And my marks went up. Good.
Yeah.
Just read the first half. Whatever that marker is, where you're like, okay, now he's telling me how to do it in different genres. Just read the genres you care about.
Yeah. All right. I'll give it a crack. Yeah. I need to. I'm getting a Kindle for Christmas, so I'm like pausing all reading until I get my Kindle, and then I'm going to read that one.
That's a good one. Like I said, only the first, whatever, the third half, whatever it is. You'll know when it makes the change. You'll be like, oh, this is probably that part right here.
Yeah, this is the bit Kurt's told me about. Brilliant. Well, maybe we'll dive into your Obsidian workflow if that's great. Because it's good. We already said, guys, that we're going to do a like separate conversation in the next couple of months about productivity. Because like I watched a few of Kurtz's videos over the couple of months, and I've been like sort of learning a bit from you. So there's even deeper conversations. But I'll let you guide us through your Obsidian if that's right.
Cool.
Carry on.
So before we dive into everything here and make a note, I don't use daily notes. I have no idea why people use them. It just seems, I don't know, useless to me. I don't care what day I took a note on, really. Even like my suffix up here, like the Zettelkasten style suffix, has no bearing except that I've run into times when I have note collisions where I want to name something the same, but it's not actually the same note. It needs to be different. And instead of fighting a name, I'm like, I'll just add a suffix in there. So, and my current database also has some, well, I guess we're in graph view. So let's go back over here. Collective courage out of graph view though. Okay. How do we do that again? So like I said, I use my OneWriter on my iPad most. Something I fall victim to originally, and still I'm trying to dig myself out of it, is that originally this type of link didn't show up in your graph view. Right? You used to have it as like a double bracket. So I still have some that are kind of split between the two, right? And I have a marriage note somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I actually have a few duplicate notes because of uninteresting reasons and syncing at one point. Where I was testing out Dropbox and iCloud. But yeah, daily notes just don't work for me. I find them useless. I don't know why people care.
Yeah, that's fine.
I do use it though for book notes, right? So what do I say? You can even look on the War on Normal People since we talked about it briefly. And so you can see there's two notations here. This one is just so it shows up in line in OneWriter. That's it. So that's it. That's just the format they need. There's no other reason to have that except for that. And that's in my way. So, and I admit I'm still kind of switching back and forth between taking notes and doing a lot of linking into a different note, right? So this links into, or in this view, right? Lack of mobility and social ills, right? But my actual note is the lack of financial mobility is a breeding ground for political hostility, right? And it's out of the page number there, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, got you.
And then
so you take notes on more like per page?
Well, I always want to find the reference, right? So my formal training is as a counselor. And so we had to learn like APA citations there. And so I always want to know what the page is, right? So I can go back and make sure I have the context correct as well. Because I've totally gone back and been like, okay, I see why I think this, but the context of the writer, if I quote them saying this, then I would say no. So I could say, hey, when I read this from the writer, this is my thought, right? And I even took a personal note in here about lack of financial mobility and talking to a guy I know who said, well, kids could never afford that type of house I have. You guys just need to give up on that type of dream. Right? And I was like, well, that's kind of harsh. Or talking to a friend a cycling friend, who in one sentence said that, oh, men should be able to do more things as a father. And then also said, oh, but if you take more than a week off of work when you have a kid, that's not acceptable. I was like, so I've referenced that a few times when I think of like, I guess male gatekeeping. So that's kind of where my notes come from. I used to do a lot more quotes. I do a lot less quotes now, right? And even the lack of mobility and social ills, I linked to the second mountain. If we can't accomplish our first mountain, which is like just financial security, to simplify it, we can never accomplish our second mountain, which is our purpose.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Right. So there's that note there contains these two items here. As far as, and I linked off so that I can link to this specific note, the lack of ability and social ills, in other spots as well, easily.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite interesting how you're breaking it down. But I'm guessing you don't just take the notes out of the book, you actually just extract your like own approach to it, right? And like you write
I try to, like I said, I used to do a lot more quotes, but I try to add my own context to it, because that's the important part, right? That's where I can find like 6 notes that are similar context. That's how we jumped from the war on normal people and, you know, thoughts on, well, this right here, lack of financial mobility, right? If you can't get the job, you can't achieve your first mountain.
Yeah.
And then what's the result of that, right?
Yeah.
Finding an out group that you can blame, because everyone wants to abdicate responsibility for their own problems. That's just like, you always want to do that. Your kids, hey, did you do this? It wasn't me. I used to say this, my invisible friend did it when I was like an only child. My mom would be like, oh, okay, well, you're responsible for your invisible friend. Right? When I'm talking to my kids, who poured cereal all over the couch? My unicorn. Well, you're in charge of the unicorn. So it's your problem, right? And this is like, and adults do it. They're just like craftier about it, right? Happens in a job. Well, your manager passes off a task. Now it's your fault. Now it's your problem. They didn't actually see if you had time for it, but they play task hot potato with whatever hits their inbox and pass it off to your inbox.
Yeah.
So abdicating responsibility to actually take a bigger step back and see what we can do.
Brilliant.
So,
and how do you go about, like, so let's say you've got these all down and obviously you've linked them up. How do you go about like reviewing them on a routine basis? Do you like just pick a topic, or do you just pick?
So if I'm a topic I'm interested in, then absolutely yes. Like I'd search and find some notes on the things, and I'd use the graph view. But something I also do regularly, I'll just have a caveat here that we may have to just blank a chunk, because we're going to hit a random note. I have no idea what's in there. It could be everything from the war on normal people to something on sex. So we'll just go, because my notes
could get raunchy, folks.
A wide gamut, right? So this is, again, learning code, right? This would let me learn about the Ring Central API and earn points towards something like a System 76 laptop.
Yeah.
So this is the Ring Central API. They have like a coding competition. So this is like, oh, let's remember that. Okay. It's not really a task. I'm not like planning to do this in the future, but it would let me learn more about the Ring Central API, let me learn a new coding language, new coding methods, and get a free Linux laptop out of it eventually. Sure. Why not? Right.
and do you use it for tasks as well, or is it another application that you use it for?
I use Things 3 for my tasks.
Okay, brilliant. And then
the only tasks that would go in here is if I have a, what is it, Composer, using Composer with WordPress. So this is just started. I've already got DevonThink open, and I did a screencast on this, which will come out, I don't know, I think 2 weeks from today, and today is November 18th, something like that. And she actually showed building this note. And so this is, I have to write an article for Nexus. I'll actually be doing the research tomorrow. I already went through and had like a whole bunch of questions in an Omni outline, and then saved all the resources that came up out of those searches off the DevonThink. And so I'll go through DevonThink, and I will actually, so this is one of the articles, and I will go through and actually link all the articles I'm going to read. And I basically will read through them until I'm like, I read this, I know this, right? And then when I'm going back to write, I'll actually go through and mark this off as this has been, incorporated into my outline. That's the only time I really use a task, is just to kind of check off the resources. And you may see an outline. This turned into an outline too. What is it? Getting your store online. There you go. So this is just going to move you out of the way. All right, if I go to outline view. So this was a course that I taught. I've actually taught multiple times. I used to teach very similar at a local community college in Vancouver. And so I basically went through that material, went through some new research, because I do like the research. And built this outline, which I could look over here. And so as I was kind of rewriting it, I could go through and like decide what I wanted to write and what I didn't. And this will actually probably also turn into a Skillshare course, just because I have the knowledge and I have the outline and I presented it multiple times. So for me to sit down for 2 hours and record it and then to do it will be like it'll take way longer to do the editing afterwards and put in like a slide here and there and stuff and set up multi-camera. That'll take way longer than the material. Right.
That's it. Yeah. And do you use it for any other? So I think you mentioned there about articles and things like that. Do you use it for like casual note taking and things like that? Like,
what do you mean by casual note taking?
Well, I guess like, like journaling, or do you use that? Nope.
Nope. So I go through journaling sometimes.
Okay.
I think journaling fits into daily notes. Like if you want to have a digital journal, then daily notes make sense. But I just don't. If I'm going to journal, I'll grab one of my fountain pens sitting in that cup over there on that thing, right. and a yellow notebook in the back, and I'll do that. And I go off and on for probably 3-4 years. I was a very solid bullet journaler overall, and that kind of was more of a personal journal, like what happened in the day.
Yeah.
But I don't write a personal journal all the time. I don't worry about it. When things get stressful, I'm more likely to just pull it out, sit down for an hour, write down what I want, and then have a notebook.
Yeah. All right. That's pretty cool. Brilliant. In terms of how do you use the graph here? Because obviously a lot of people use it in different ways. Do you tend to browse it when you're like on the local side of stuff, when you're in a specific note, or?
Yeah. So I might be looking for marriage or to read, right? I might look for like a to read. So I want to be able to find all the books that I have marked as to read. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to find connections in there. And then I want to find ones that are marriage. I was asking this morning. So here's some books that I've already determined from other sources are good books to read, right? So we could open up Fair Play. And it's to read. It talks about misogyny in some way in marriage. And I'd go find that book and be like, is this the one I actually want to read right now?
Yeah.
Right. And I might even see, okay, well, where did I link that? Open backlinks. I don't know why it split on me. Let's go to graph. It's split where I can't see it again. So open local graph. There we go. And see like, where did I link to this, right? And I might see where is this linked to? Nowhere. So I didn't find what that says to me is I didn't find this in some other resource. So I didn't find this in a book already. I found this in some other way. But my goal here is hopefully I find, say, Fair Play or some other book that's cited in 3 or 4 other books I've already read. And in which case, I probably need to go back to that one. Right? We can see that we've already looked at the War on Normal People, so let's do that. Right, here's all the resources mentioned. Excellent Sheep, Hillbilly Elegy, which I have read. The Missing Men, Averages Over. I read that one. Ages of Discord. So these are all different ones that I may read, and I'll even go back sometimes to find the reference, like what was it referenced as, right?
Yeah.
Nations. That's an older book. It's like an older economics book, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
For future ages after capitalism. So depending on what I want, and then so I didn't actually create like a full template on this. Some of them I have been, say, as we've been updating the system, some of them get a full note, like a template, and I've actually tagged it under the topics that I think it falls under once I look at it. Like Averages Over. I've read this one, but I don't have a note on it yet. Or maybe that I don't have the...
Yeah. And how many books do you get through in, like, say, a month? Because it seems like my query is like, if somebody's looking to use Obsidian for book note taking, then like, do you recommend it if they say get through once a month, or like one book a month? I
probably get through one nonfiction book a week at least. Good, yeah. I think I've read 70 something books this year. Now a bunch of those, like the Expanse series, I read that before. I've been collecting the big copies of it, and so as I've been getting those, I've been rereading it. Because I only had it on Kindle, but that's a series I've read multiple times on Kindle. I'll basically pay whatever it is, as long as it's not costing me a limb to collect the whole series. And I have a few series like that, and so those count into my 70 something books, but I probably get pretty close to 52 nonfiction books a year.
Wow, that's pretty good. And like, how long does it take to make, like, from start to finish a note about the book?
Well, it really depends, right? So like I have a note template. Open up a new note that's random. And so what I'll have to do, because Linux system this is taught, people always ask me this is taught. So I'll go BZet, because for really nerdy reasons, this doesn't use an NS text field, which is a normal Mac OS text field. And so the Mac OS default fill-in snippets won't work. If you use Alfred, if you use Text Expander, anything else, they'll work just fine, right? But I don't, because that template I just pulled out and taught with the :BZ lets me also fill in my iPad the exact same template, because it crosses between systems, because it's the Mac system one and it's just their system text snippets. So that's a nerdy thing. And so I'd fill in this, I'd fill in the author here. Notebook is sort of vestigial right now. That's a reference if I was like, so if I had a notebook, it'd be 2020 R1, whatever page it is. So I know what notebook to go back to find the original. Now, not everything gets a note anymore. But I honestly assume I will probably do those again at some point. I try not to get too caught up in, I said I used this system once on YouTube, so I must always use the said system. I honestly don't care. When people are like, hey, you said you did this 2 weeks ago. I'm like, well, I changed.
Fast moving.
Fast moving. I will use whatever seems to work the best. And I work very hard in general to not let past Curtis commit current Curtis to a course of action, because
good rule.
Because current Curtis has got different priorities. So, and then I'd add any tags in here, right? If it's a new book that I haven't, like I want to read this book, I'd get to read, and then I would get whatever, community building, right? That's another kind of long-term research topic that I have. And if I already own it, I might even tag it as own, because I own it. I don't need to go purchase this, right? And I think I own, 300 books. So sometimes that's just like, I think I own a book on this, but I don't know. And I keep track of those in Book Track as well. So I could, in theory, find it.
The only reason I ask is because, like, people might be watching this and going, right, I want to start taking my book notes. So I guess it's like a, just learning about the way you do stuff in terms of process. Gordon, I was going to say, is there anything like else you want to go into detail on?
So my current note, what's it called? The Klansman, Life of a Klansman. And so this is actually a current one. I was reading this morning and made some of these notes. Life of a Klansman is by Edward Ball, looking into his history of white supremacy, I suppose. And he actually has an interesting fact. I don't think I got this, but basically because of how many people were white supremacists, Ku Klux Klan members, a couple hundred years ago, basically 50% of the U.S. has a KKK member in their history. That's just how it works, right? And so just examining this and looking at things like, these are all just kind of one note, and I will go back over this later when I go to move to review to like break them out into like specific thoughts, right? Like Christians go for slavery because the Bible is full of slaves. I grew up in a Christian household. I still go to church, but just looking at that as a justification for it. And I also might even think, as we're talking, what do we endorse now that we shouldn't, right? Because something I'm personally on the lookout for is what ideas do we have now than 100 years to go, boy, you were idiots. Because like we look back 100 years and be like, boy, they're idiots. We're so much better now. No, there's stuff we think that. So I'm always looking out for stuff like that, right? Or even looking at, this is another interesting note this morning, that Black people in New Orleans started their own militia to support the South in the Confederate, like in the Civil War. Because they were just covering their ass. They said, we totally support you, where they were the free Black people. And as soon as they had an opportunity to not support them because New Orleans was overtaken, they said, no, how can we help you guys in the North? Because we don't want slavery at all. But there was like a CYA move. So what other CYA cover your ass moves are we forced into now? So they're just like, I don't have an answer to that, but like that might be. So I'll actually probably break this out into its own note and kind of dive a little deeper into it when I go back through my review process later.
All right, got you. Okay, that's really interesting. Again, you read much more in-depth books than I do, crikey. I need to
you don't need to
add some of these.
You need to do what works for you always. I said this a little bit, like I've done tons of outdoor stuff over my life, from guiding ice climbing to whitewater kayaking and dropping 40-foot waterfalls. And what you just said is very similar to stuff I'd hear there when I talk to people that were getting into it or at a different level than dropping 40-foot waterfalls regularly. And it's like, oh, I should go start doing that. I'm like, no, you should do whatever you like. Usually we'd be sitting like on the river floating down and be like, snow-capped mountains around us, 20 eagles. Why is this bad? Like, this is not like, you need to do what you're interested in, and only if you really want to deep read, then should you, and you shouldn't feel bad about it if you don't. You got other stuff you enjoy that I could care less about. So
that's it. Like probably like Formula One or something like
Yeah, I don't care.
that.
My
Yeah.
friend's always like, "Hey, you want to do sports?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go kick a field goal in the net." And like no, I was kidding. But I
Yeah.
could name European road cyclists that they have no idea who they are.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. Nibbly, right?
Nibbly, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, got it. Brilliant, Curtis. This is this is fantastic. Thank you for taking the time out to show us inside the Obsidian that you use for book notes. It's really great. Is there obviously people going to find you after this call? Do you want to point them in the right direction?
Sure. And the best place to find me is curtismchale.ca. I'm not sure what my YouTube channel is. I'd have to look it up again because I think it's actually got an old name that I can no longer change, which was originally my business name and coding oriented. So I think it's like SFN Design WP, but there's a whole bunch of like weird capitalization in there too. So Curtis McHale is just the best way.
Love it,
.ca.
yeah.
And then I'm Curtis McHale on most social media as well. And you'll put a link to my YouTube channel in there, right?
Lovely job. Yeah, and the courses, so check them out. But it's been great having you, and we'll have to do a separate chat, so won't be the last time. But let's talk soon, yeah?
Awesome. Thanks.
Lovely.